Okay, so at this point, Luciana, all the attendees are available and part of this meeting?
Yes, there's 15 attendees that
Okay,
have
perfect.
joined.
Perfect. Okay, so Josh, I'm going to get it started if it's okay with you.
Go ahead.
Okay, all right. All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Landfill Advisory Committee meeting number 4. This meeting is called to order at 10:06 a.m. Today is December 14th, 2021. My name is John Katahira, and I will be facilitating today's meeting. Pursuant to Governor David Ige's emergency proclamation related to the state's COVID-19 Delta response issued on November 29, 2021, and in order to follow public participation in this meeting in a manner consistent with safe practices and social distancing requirements, this meeting is being conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology. Let's see. And I already, okay, here we go. So the agenda, just a quick sneak peek at our agenda today. We're gonna do roll call as well as a comment period, a public comment period. And then second, we're gonna do approval of prior meeting minutes. Third, we're gonna have a really robust and important presentation and discussion highlighted by several speakers. And last, any final announcements and adjournment. Okay, so moving on to roll call. Each member of the Landfill Advisory Committee is participating in the meeting from a non-public location. So in accordance with applicable laws and rules, members, when I call your name, please say here or present. Also state if anyone else is present at your location, this being a virtual meeting. Okay, so I'm going to go in alphabetical order. Stephen Chang.
I'm present, and there is no one here in my area.
Thank you, Steve. Suzanne Jones.
Here, and my husband is in the house with me somewhere.
Thank you, Suzanne. Ken Carhara.
Present, and I'm alone in my conference room.
Thank you, Ken. Emmett Kinney.
Here, and no one else present with me.
Thank you, Emmett. Natalie McKinney, and I believe she is not available today. Brennan Morioka, and I believe Brennan is also not available today. Jimmy Nakatani. Jimmy, sorry, you're muted. Can you try again?
Here, and I'm by myself.
Very good. Thanks. Thanks, Jimmy. Next, Cynthia Resentes.
I'm here by myself in the office.
Thank you, Cynthia. And last, Trisha Kehalani Watson. I believe she was also going to be unavailable. And then just as a note, my understanding is that Trisha and Brennan Morioka are traveling today. So they're going to be mostly unavailable, but if they become available, they're going to jump on the call. Okay, thanks, Landfill Advisory Committee. Moving on to our next item on the agenda, we have oral comments, public oral comments. So for the public, if you have any comments on any of the agenda items for today's meeting, we would like to remind everyone in this meeting that this is being recorded. And after this meeting, the recording will be posted on the Department of Environmental Services website. And excuse me on this part, this is a whole list of instructions that I have to read, which isn't my favorite thing to do in public. My English teacher would be so disappointed. So pardon me as I read now. Okay, so members of the public may participate in today's meeting by interactive conference technology from remote locations and may present oral testimony by video conference or phone. The following procedures are in effect for today's meeting. 1, remote testimony will be accepted on all agenda items. Each speaker will be limited to 2-minute public 2-minute comment period. Second, all participants will enter the remote meeting with view-only privileges. For individuals providing remote testimony, staff will bring you into the meeting and unmute you at the time you are called to present comments. When reminded of the time limit, please conclude your remarks as promptly as possible. 3, for those of you joining by telephone, we do not know your name, so you will be identified by the prefix of your phone number only. 4, we will take public comments from each person on the list of registered commenters first. 5, if you did not previously register but wish to provide comments, please raise your hand on WebEx. If you have joined us by telephone, you can press *3 to raise your hand if you would like to provide oral comments. 6, and last, when your name or telephone prefix is called, you will be given a few moments to respond. If you do not respond after a few moments, we will move on to the next person. Please state your name and identify the agenda item you are speaking on. Okay, so at this time, we would like to open this up to any comments from the public. I have a list of people who pre-registered, and I do not see anybody on this list who wishes to provide oral comments. Josh and Luciana, if that is incorrect, please let me know now. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I don't see anyone right now with raised hands.
Yeah, and by the way, for everyone, Josh is the project manager for this, and he's helping me to help moderate. The screen that I see as presenter right now, I cannot really see the participants, so that's why he's helping me. Josh, still no raised hands?
Yeah, I don't see any.
Okay, so at this point, we're taking any comments from anybody.
I'll give a few more minutes if you'd like to raise your hand on WebEx. If you'd like to provide a comment.
Maybe I won't be as generous as you, Josh. Maybe not minutes, but a few seconds.
We have a person, Joel Simon Petrie, who would like to provide testimony.
Okay, great.
So I'm going to go ahead and let this person unmute this person so they can speak.
Very
Just
good.
a moment.
Thank you. And in case you haven't figured it out by now, Luciana is our IT person working behind the scenes, so that's why she's jumping in. Joelle?
Joel,
Hi.
yeah.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Luciana. This is Joelle Simon Pietri. Rather than a formal comment at this point, I just wanted to make a request and see if it might be possible in future meetings to have a public comment period after the presentations. It's kind of hard to make a comment before actually seeing any of the material.
Well noted. Thank you, Joelle.
That's all I had for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Committee members, any questions for Joelle?
Mhm.
No? Okay, any other raised hands? Josh or Luciana? No? Okay, very good. Joelle, thank you again for your comments. Okay, so moving on to the agenda, our next item is approval of prior meeting minutes. So we have 3 meetings that we need to cover to approve minutes for today. These are meetings 1, 2, and 3. Our committee members were provided the minutes ahead of time so that they were able to review. the minutes. The minutes also are available on the project website. So if anybody in the public is curious, you can always get to it there. So regarding meeting number 1, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of this meeting held on October 4, 2021?
This
I make
is
a
Cynthia.
motion
So
to
moved.
approve the meeting minutes for October 4th.
Okay, Suzanne, I think Cynthia beat you. So motion to approve
Okay.
by Cynthia, committee
I will
member
second
Cynthia.
it.
Suzanne will second it. It has been moved and seconded. Are there any objections to the approval of the minutes from October 4, 2021?
No objections. This is Ken Kawara.
Okay. Noting no objections from the members, the minutes are approved. Okay, moving on to meeting number 2. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of committee meeting number 2 held on October 25, 2021?
Cynthia, go ahead.
I'll go ahead and move that we accept the minutes for meeting number 2.
Thank you, Cynthia. Can I have a second?
I will second it.
Thank you, Suzanne. Okay, so this has been moved and seconded. Are there any objections to the approval of the minutes for the October 25, 2021 meeting?
None.
Noting no objections from our committee members, the minutes are approved. Okay, and third and last for now, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the limited committee meeting on November 3rd, 2021?
I'll make the motion to move acceptance of meeting 3 minutes.
Thank you, Cynthia. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Suzanne. It has been moved and seconded. Are there any objections to the approval of the minutes from the meeting on November 3, 2021?
None.
Noting no objections from our committee members, the minutes are approved. Okay, very good. Thanks you folks for getting through that. Next, and this is the heart of today's discussion. So I'm really happy that we're kind of speeding along to allow us the most amount of time possible for today's presentation and discussions. Super, super important. Okay, so as far as our presentations go, we have 4 or 5 items. I will start by doing just a real brief recap of meeting number 3, which was a limited meeting. The meeting itself was held on November 3rd, 2021 from 1:10 to 3:59 p.m., very exact. The meeting itself was a limited meeting, and it was limited due to health and safety precautions, not just COVID, but also this meeting was a site visit, a tour of 3 facilities, namely the PVT landfill, Waimanalo Gulch sanitary landfill, and H-Power. And each of these sites had, I guess, limitations in the amount of people that it could host, as well as being active facilities. So we didn't want to have too many people walking around for health and safety purposes. Basically, it was a bus tour. We had 20 people on a bus driving from Kapolei to PVT landfill, and then to Waimanalo Gulch sanitary landfill, and then H-Power. And then after the H-Power site visit, we ended the meeting at that point and then returned back to Kapolei, returned all of our guests, committee members as well. So it was a really informative meeting. The intent was to learn more about how each of the facilities operate, and for our committee members to get a firsthand view of some of the impacts and the environmental impacts that each of these sites present. We also want to send out a warm mahalo to all of our terrific tour guides that provided all the information for everyone, and our awesome bus driver. You know, that bus was actually like kind of like off-roading, and I thought at times we weren't going to get through certain points of the tour because it was pretty rough driving, but our tour guide, our bus driver, was able to drive us safely through that entire tour. So thank you to everybody involved. Do I have any questions, or any of the committee members want to have a discussion on meeting number 3? Okay. If nothing, then we'll move on to the next presentation, which will be a discussion of a resident survey that was done. Josh Nagashima was the man in charge there, and Josh is going to be doing this part of the presentation. So Josh, I'll control it. I'll control slides from my side. Yeah, so just go ahead.
Thanks, John. Before I get into the survey, I just want to mention that LAC Meeting 3 the recording is available online at our website, so please check it out there if you have not already. And online is also where the resident survey still resides. We're running it till the end of the month. The main purpose of the survey was to get residents involved. We really want to get residents involved in this process, try to get as many comments as we can throughout the process and get people aware of what we're trying to do here. Of course, as the refuse division, we think that siting of a landfill is very important. It allows us to collect the trash, and I'll kind of get into some of those details as I go through the survey. Yeah, so the resident survey is still online. If you haven't taken it, please do take it. It's a Microsoft Form survey, has about 20 questions on it. Some of it is knowledge about solid waste, and others contribute to this LAC process, as I'll go through. We officially kicked it off on August 27th, and we advertised it through our website, Facebook, Twitter, and we also put on an ad on the bus. So even though we may not have gotten a lot of responses from that, we had a lot of reach there. And of course, we're always looking at other ways of expanding that. So if you have any suggestions on how we can reach out to more people, please do reach out to us. So right now, the survey is actually up to 489 responses. I just checked it. These results that I'm going to present are a little bit dated from December 7th, but there's 476 responses that are logged at that point. So quite a few responses. Next slide, please. Thanks. So just kind of the demographics of what was in the survey. So you'll notice when I go through each question that the numbers are kind of going to jump, and these questions were in between. So just to summarize, from the survey, most of the people that took the survey were between the ages of 36 and 50 or 51 and 65. And those groups were about equal, but 2 times any other group. So the younger and the older were about half as much. There was a question about what zip code you're from. And so 96797 was the highest inputted zip code at 21%. And looking at the responses, a lot of them found out about the survey through the Village Park newsletter. So it seems like those resident newsletters are pretty popular. Most of the residents that took the survey were 20+ year residents. And that was 10 times any other. Of the questions, there was a question about what people thought their knowledge of trash handling on Oahu was. It rated at an average of 3.69, which is a C, which is pretty good. So most people think they know about trash handling on Oahu. And there was another question about the importance of reduction, reuse, and recycling in daily life. And people answered 4.47, which is really high, very close to an A, 90%. So a lot of people think that those things are very important in their life. About 40% of people visited Waimanalo Gulch Sanitary Landfill, the existing landfill. So that's quite a bit. Almost half of the participants have visited the site. Of those that visited and did not visit, the appearance of Waimanalo Gulch was a 3.5, so it's 70% C. And for those that did not visit Waimanalo Gulch, we presented a picture of the portion of Waimanalo Gulch that you may have seen on our website, and that's how they were able to rate. Next slide. So I'm going to point out the important questions. I've also posted on the website the results that the results are coming from. So you can check out all the responses there, all the questions and responses there, but I'm just going to highlight a few. So one of the questions was select all the statements below that you agree with regarding the importance of landfills. So of these statements, there was landfills are disposal sites for trash after collection and or processing. The collection of my trash depends on a landfill as a backup disposal site. Landfills are disposal sites for special waste that can't be processed at H-Power, like medical sharps, asbestos, etc. And landfills can be disposal sites for debris that can be generated by a disaster, such as a hurricane, and this allows neighborhoods to be cleared of waste more quickly. So this was kind of more to see what people's knowledge was. So actually all the answers are correct. So the main one that I want to point out is that H-Power is dependent on having a landfill as a backup disposal site. But as you can see, about 3/4 of people answered for each of those, even though they're all correct. So just to be aware, for everyone to be aware of what the landfill is needed for. Next question, next slide, please. So the next set of questions that I wanted to point out was the trash destination. So the first question I'm pointing out here is what percentage of Oahu's trash collected from homes and businesses goes directly into the landfill? So most people got it right, that 6% of trash goes to the landfill directly. So we process the rest of it first. And then, as you know, we take ash to the landfill. But there are still some people out there that believe a lot more trash goes to the landfill than really does. So there's some people that answered 100%, some that answered 54%, and some that answered 25%. And then the next question was, under normal conditions, roughly 6% of Oahu's trash goes directly into the landfill. Where does the remaining 94% of trash go? So most people know that the rest of the trash goes to H-Power. So we've done a good job advertising that and showing people that we're taking it there to be processed first to generate electricity before we take it to the landfill, whatever we need to take to the landfill anyway. Next slide, please, John. So kind of getting to the questions that are related to this LAC process. So we wanted people to rate the significance of criteria for landfill siting. And as you might notice, so distance to surface and drinking water was the most important answer to pretty much everybody on average. And there was almost no somewhat insignificant or insignificant results. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to reach out to the Board of Water Supply, get them here to talk to you today. But of the other important ones, so of course, distance to homes and nearby population density was the second, and distance to important ag lands, agricultural and cultural sites, and sensitive ecological areas was also highly rated. Next question. Next slide, sorry.
Hey, Josh, if I can jump in, I'll point out that the distance to surface and drinking water results, as heavily favored as that is, that was before the recent events at Red Hill, right? So it might even look different. It might even look more favorable now.
Yep, thanks for pointing that out, John. All right, so kind of validating the process that we're going through now, the next question that I wanted to point out was where should the next landfill be located? So the answer that got the most responses was the location that ranks highest when considering all the criteria from the previous question. And we'll get into criteria later in this presentation, but that's kind of the process that we're trying to go through here. The next highest answer was at the location with the best combination of having the most capacity, being closest to H-Power, and the lowest cost. So that, you know, shows that taxpayers are concerned about how their money is used, and you know, having a landfill with more capacity would allow us to kind of not go through this siting process in the future as frequently. But we'll get into that a little bit more when we get into the criteria. The other answers were at a location as far from residential areas as possible, away from any area with an active landfill, and not in my community. You can see the responses there. Next slide. So the last question, or one of the last questions that we had on the survey, was we wanted to see how much a beneficial use would impact people's opinion of where the landfill is. So if the landfill was planned to have a beneficial use after it closes, similar to Kakalako Waterfront Park, the site of the ash landfill for the former Kewalo incinerators, would you be more open to having a landfill in your community? And surprisingly, some people said yes. Most said no, and there were quite a few that said maybe. And we're definitely considering a community benefits package during this process. and the last meeting of the LAC will kind of work out how that community benefits package is going to work and what we might provide. Okay, so I'm opening up for discussion to the LAC if they have any questions or comments about the survey. Again, you know, we're trying to get the community involved as much as possible. So please like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Also keep an eye on the website. We're updating that constantly with new meetings and new info. So we're trying to get people involved. And there's also an email there, new landfill at honolulu.gov, where we're taking comments and questions as well.
Okay, so opening it up to any questions or comments from the committee members. Thank you, Josh, by the way. Anybody? I guess you did a really great job with providing all that information, Josh. No questions. Okay, so why don't we start moving towards the Board of Water Supply's presentation. So before we go there, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the board representatives on this call today for making time to participate in today's meeting. When we had scheduled this, Red Hill wasn't the crisis as it is today, but the board kept its promise to participate in this discussion. I think the importance of their input in this process is more valuable today, obviously, than it was, you know, a month ago with everything that's going on. And I know the board is really busy with everything right now. So thank you, Ernie and staff, for making the time and committing to this process. Before we hand it over to the board for their presentation, I did want to say that we do have two back-to-back presentations that we're going to do, which is the Board of Water Supply, and then that's going to be immediately followed by HDR to talk a little bit more about the technical aspects of landfills and how landfills can be designed and constructed to protect groundwater resources. So we're going to have both presentations, one after the other, and then we're going to take comments and questions from the committee members after both presentations are done. Okay, so board, sorry if we're going to make you hang on a little bit longer to address questions, but we felt like that was the best process to discuss everything that we need to discuss. Okay, so before I invite the Board of Water Supply to do their presentation, wanted to ask Wes Yokoyama, who is our E&V director, to make a few comments. Wes.
Thank you, John. And I want to thank the Landfill Advisory Committee members for coming today. Today actually starts the real hard work. We had some background information that we were working on with LAC in prior meetings. But today, you know, starts the meat of the advisory part of that job. And I want to remind everybody that on the committee that they were handpicked by the mayor. And the mayor has a saying, he tells all of us directors that, you know, real leaders don't run from the hard stuff, or as he says it, hard stuff with his Boston accent. But so he knows all of you, you know, are participating as volunteers, and he appreciates that. We're going to start some hard discussions today. I also want to thank the BWS. The concern about the groundwater supply and possible effects from the landfill was actually triggered by LAC member Cynthia Resentes in the first meeting, and we're thankful for that. So we did reach out to the board. The board provided a lot of information to us, and we thought that it'd be great for the board to provide a presentation to the public as well as the Landfill Advisory Committee. You know, there really is nothing quite as important, I think, as clean water. I'm going to agree with the board on that. However, and I'm biased because for 32 years, I've been a wastewater engineer, a water engineer, so water resources engineer. So I come from a little biased view, but there's also a need, a great need in our American capitalistic society to get rid of solid waste. You know, we are the biggest generators of solid waste. The stuff we throw away, third world countries are so happy to have, you know, but we throw it away. We're a disposable community. And we won't be changing our habits very soon. So there's, you know, a great need for landfill, for recycling, for H power. I think today we're going to see that there'll be, you know, conflicting needs on limited space. And the Landfill Advisory Committee will have some hard things to look at. And we don't want to say at ENV that one is more important than the other. They're both important, but you know, the criteria and the ranking will reflect what is more important, what the priorities are. And that's what we're asking the Landfill Advisory Committee to develop. And we're going to talk about those criteria at the end. So again, I'd like to thank BWS and turn this over to BWS for their presentation.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Wes.
John?
Sorry, Ernie, I'm going to hand it over to Erwin, if that's
Okay.
correct. Is Erwin going to do the presentation?
Yes, Aaron's going to do the presentation.
Okay.
Just want to say a few words in the
I'm going to
beginning.
make Erwin the presenter, and then why don't you go ahead and then you folks take it from there. Thank you.
Go ahead, Aaron. Just to start out with, Ernie Lam, Manager and Chief Engineer for the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. I just want to thank Wes and Mike for inviting us to this meeting, and I appreciate it. I know that this committee has some very difficult challenges ahead. Our presentation will provide a perspective from the Board of Water Supply. And for us, it's Kabai Ola, Ola Ikabai, water is life. And that's our mission. So, but we, you know, I also understand that, you know, we also generate waste that needs to be managed too. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Erwin Kawata. He's the head of our water quality division. We have with us from BWS also Mr. Barry Usagawa, head of our water resources division, and Ms. Kathleen Elliott Paihinui, head of our communications office. Erwin, go ahead.
Thank you. So let me share screen here. Can everyone see that?
Yes,
Okay,
Erwin.
so good morning, everyone. Thank you, committee, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and share our thoughts about and perspectives about siting a new landfill in relation to our groundwater aquifer. What I'd like to do first is just simply kind of start off with, let me get my pointer going here, just kind of start off with some basics about our groundwater, talk a little bit about it itself, and some of the features that make it very special in terms of it as a resource. Then kind of move over in terms of siting the new landfill. We believe there are other alternatives that could be viable. Some of the things that we've learned about landfills in terms of its leachates and specific constituents that give us some concern about its potential influence on the environment as well as the drinking water resource. So kind of like to start, all of our drinking water here on island begins as rain. As this rain falls on the island, it begins to percolate through the environment into the subsurface. And as you know, our island is volcanic in origin. So the subsurface is really made up of cracks and crevices and porous basaltic structures. And this water, as it falls over time, it begins to accumulate in the subsurface and actually resides within the cracks and crevices of the subsurface basalt. Around the coastal part of the island is a feature called caprock. It is a marine sedimentary deposit that's very, very impervious, and it helps to do one of the major things is to help to prevent this fresh water from leaking into the ocean. And so this caprock actually holds back this water and allows the water to, as it falls over time, hundreds of thousands of years, to actually build up to form a groundwater aquifer that is hydrologically connected throughout the entire system and resides under the entire island itself. There are different ways of extracting or pumping water from this aquifer. The top of it is called the groundwater table. There is an inclined shaft that takes water from the surface, as well as deep wells that's drilled into the formation where we can pump out the water. As fresh water is much more or less dense than salt water, it actually floats within the cracks and crevices above the saltwater mixture, and between the two is what is called a zone of mixture. So this particular formation is the only one of its kind. There are no other formations like this on island. So this is a map of the Commission on Water Resources Management hydrologic units. It is a way of managing and keeping track of how much water is withdrawn from each of the different parts of the aquifer itself. So these lines here are simply drawn for administrative purposes only. They don't represent any kind of subsurface boundary or any kind of divide that separates one portion from the other. It is throughout the entire system. It's all hydrologically connected, and water is always moving through this subsystem, this particular formation. Some parts of the aquifer can produce a lot of water. Here, as an example, Waimalu can produce, or its sustainable yield is 45 million gallons per day. Other parts can produce less, such as this area here, Wailea East, that only can deliver 2 million gallons per day. So as shown here, I think some of the most greatest productive and parts of the aquifer are in this region here. Around the coast, as I talked about earlier, there's a caprock. This picture shows about its location around the island, and the caprock in of itself, like I said, helps to prevent this, leakage of the fresh water into the ocean. And around the island itself, there's a substantial amount of caprock area that actually reside, and under it is that freshwater lens. And because it's so impervious, it makes it a great place to for activities that could have a real impact on the aquifer itself. This is a map of the underground control map line of the Department of Health. They've established an area where this UIC line, areas below the UIC line are allowed for underground disposal of waste. Areas above it has been designated or known to be the actual freshwater aquifer itself. So many people refer to this as what is commonly known as the pass or no pass line, or the underground injection control line managed by the Department of Health. And so this line, in some areas, pretty much match up where the caprock is located. Other parts are actually right over the caprock itself. This map shows all of the areas in which the board has, facilities, all of our pumping wells, and where we are actually delivering water and actually have wells that are tapping the groundwater aquifer that we use to provide drinking water to our customers. So this is that map that identified those potential locations where the next landfill could be sited. According to this map and the work that was available, information available, the areas that are uncolored are the places where areas in which the next landfill could be sited. And if we take a look at where these areas are, they're directly over the drinking water aquifer. And as an example, in this particular area here, we do have wells that are right within this area We do have Eva Schaff here as one of our projects that's slated to provide, a significant amount of water for Libre Oahu. Landfills of themselves, there has been some long history on it. There are actual literature papers here produced by EPA and USGS, talks about concerns about landfill products eventually leaking into the environment. And although there are, mechanisms and technologies available to try to protect the environment from leachates, according to in this one particular paper by USGS, such systems can fail, and leachates have been found, or contaminants from landfills have been found in the subsurface groundwater. To our understanding, the current Waimanalo Gulch landfill generates about 3.6 million gallons of leachate annually. On a daily, that's almost 10,000 gallons per day. So that's a sizable quantity in our view, and something to really think about. In terms of the leachates itself, and these are some data that was taken from the first semi-annual groundwater and leachate monitoring report. We want to thank Department of Environmental Services for sharing this information with us. And then what I did was I just took a few of the different analytes, showed the kinds of concentrations that were detected in the leachates from the ash and groundwater monitoring wells, and kind of do a comparison between some of the wells that the board operates in Honolulu as well as downtown Honolulu. So from when we took a look at this, we had some concerns about the potential effects such leachates and other potential contaminants that could be inside of, that are in the landfill that could escape and get into the environment and into the groundwater aquifer if it was actually positioned directly over the aquifer. In many of these cases, there are several orders of magnitude compared to what we actually find in our freshwater wells. So, from our perspective, currently we are 100% dependent on groundwater. It is our only source of drinking water. The formation of itself is the only one of its kind. Protection of this resource is absolutely vital. As you know, we have some issues that we're currently dealing with, both present and in the past, and the continuation of trying to keep this resource as protected and as is important to us from a quantity and quality standpoint for now and into the future. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Erwin, if you don't mind, we're going to defer questions till after HDR's.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
Awesome.
And then go to your name.
If you can right click on me in the participant list and then make me presenter. That'd be great.
Let's see.
Yep.
Where are you?
I think you did it already, or somebody did it.
Somebody did it for me already. Okay,
Magically.
thank you very much. Thank you.
Take care of it.
Thank you, Erwin.
Thank you
very much. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to defer questions and discussions on Erwin's and the Board of Water Supplies presentation until after HDR presents this next section. So Luciana, if you can magically do that for me too, that'd be great. Mike Kaiser from HDR is going to take us through the next presentation. And again, after this presentation, we're going to open it up to discussions for anything related to what HDR is presenting or what Board of Water Supply presented.
Mike Kaiser is now the presenter.
Thank you, Luciana. Mike, you can take it away.
Yeah, let me get set up here. So are you seeing everything there?
Looks good.
Okay. All right. Good morning, folks. My part of the presentation, I'm going to present the technology adopted by the solid waste industry for protection of groundwater surrounding a municipal solid waste landfill. So in committee meeting number 1, we explained that the EPA in the State Department of Health regulates municipal solid waste landfills through the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act and the Hawaii Administrative Rules. And in those rules, we pointed out in meeting number 1 that in permitting and design and operation of a landfill, you have to meet certain criteria. And those criteria, if you recall, were site analysis, the design criteria, and the operating criteria. And we want to point out that the design criteria plays a very important role in the defense of groundwater, in the defense of groundwater protection. And the design criteria include base enclosure cap liner system, the leachate management system, and the groundwater monitoring program. But also keep in mind that the site analysis, these provide support to the design criteria. For example, in unstable areas, you don't want to site a landfill in unstable areas because you pose the risk of damaging your base liner system. And by excluding hazardous waste out of your landfill, you're reducing the likelihood of pollutants to get into the leachate and potentially, and it also reduces the threat to public health and the environment by excluding the hazardous waste. So this figure is a typical cross-section of a landfill, but before I explain what we're doing here, I wanted to discuss what the industry calls, in the solid waste industry, what is leachate? Basically, technically, well, not technically, but basically leachate is wastewater in the solid waste industry. So if you have rainfall that falls in your landfill and percolates through the waste and gets down to your leachate collection system, it's transported to a sump area and then it's pumped out by riser pipes to the top to be treated and disposed. So that's the term in the solid waste industry is for leachate. So in this figure here, we're showing the base liner system of a landfill. This is a typical MSW landfill under Subtitle D regulations. We have a base liner system. What we're showing here blown up is a double liner system. I'll explain that in the next slide. We've got the leachate collection system, which is piping and trenches at the bottom of the landfill, typically in the middle, that transports leachate that gets through the waste to a sump area where we have riser pipes that allow us to put in automated pump systems to pump the leachate out of the landfill and, again, treat it and dispose of it. We've got groundwater monitoring wells, upgrading and downgrading of the landfill. We have methane gas probes that surround the landfill that we monitor. We've got gas collection systems that we install where we pull the methane gas out of the landfill and either flare it or turn it into a landfill gas to energy project. And then this is showing the fill sequencing of a landfill. So typically you fill across the floor area, come up to the next level, fill across, and you're putting daily cover soils across the waste as you fill. Once you get a larger area completed to grade, you typically go through a partial closure where you're closing the landfill as you go. And again, the closure design consists of soil components and geosynthetic membranes and drainage net. So that's your typical cross-section of a landfill. We've taken that figure and blown up some other figures just to explain it through. Here's the base liner system for the landfill. It's basically you have your subgrade, your geosynthetic clay liner, an impermeable polyethylene liner, a drainage net liner, and in this case we've doubled this and put another clay liner, a geomembrane liner, and a drainage net liner, and then a protective soils on the top. Now it's doubled here because the city's committed to putting in a double liner if the landfill is located above the no pass line. And just for note that a double liner isn't required by rule, but would meet hazardous waste regulations if you put a double liner in. So over here we tried to match up some numbered photos, typical of here's the geosynthetic clay liner. That's basically your low permeable clay liner, this white sheeting being overlain on the subgrade. Then you have your impermeable polyethylene liner, which is deployed over the geosynthetic clay liner. And then in this picture here showing some GeoNet drainage liner going over the top of the geomembrane liner. So basically, the leachate will flow across the floor on top of, through the geocomposite drainage and get into the leachate collection system, which is down in here. So these three layers in this particular situation is doubled. So in this figure, we are showing a cross-section of a leachate trench. This is the trench, again, that's going down the middle of the landfill. And in a double line system, you would have a primary, we call it a primary leachate pipe and primary liner system, and then you would have a secondary leachate pipe and liner system. So any leachate that flows across the floor would get in the primary leachate pipe and go to the sump. And any leachate that could possibly get through the primary liner system would flow into the secondary sump and leachate pipe system and get to the sump. So the picture over here is showing this upper primary leachate pipe being installed. It's basically a pipe encased in gravel and wrapped in a geotextile filter fabric. This is a cross-section figure of the sump area. That was, we go back up here, this would be the piping system right here. The sump area basically, again, is to a primary and a secondary sump. These are the pipes coming in from the floor area, the leachate trenches, so they connect into the sump. You have larger pipes, it's called riser pipes, that lead up out of the sump to the exterior of the landfill area. And we install submersible pumps in these riser pipes and connect them to automated equipment. So the rule requires the landfill operator to maintain the leachate level in these sumps at 12 inches or less. So basically, if you're maintaining leachate levels in these sumps at 12 inches or less, no leachate is ponding out on the floor area. Everything is flowing to the sump and pumped out. And so really, if it's operating correctly, the only leachate being held in the landfill at the time is within the sump area. Your baseliner system is only as good as your construction quality assurance test plan. I wanted to call out that there's extensive testing of the geomembrane liner systems at the manufacturer level, and the owner representative, third-party representative, does testing on the liner during installation, and the installer themselves do third-party, perform construction quality assurance testing on the liner. Here's some examples of fusion welding going on the geomembrane liner. You've got pressure testing and vacuum testing of every inch of seam that's installed in the landfill, and then they even set up mobile laboratories to perform testing on site. The installer does. And the third-party construction quality assurance folks for the owner, they actually send all of their samples to an outside laboratory for testing. And then the final component of groundwater protection in the design criteria is your groundwater leachate monitoring requirement system. So groundwater monitoring is required at a network of upgrading and downgrading monitoring wells, and leachate monitoring is required at the sumps. There are some states that establish minimum spacing for upgrading and downgrading wells. Others leave it up to the enforcement agency to decide based on the groundwater monitoring program put together. Sampling of the wells, upgrading and downgrading is required quarterly, and constituents for the analysis are established by the EPA that would be indicated of a release of leachate from the landfill. And some site-specific indicator parameters are also developed for the site, such as things like COD, nitrates, chlorides, pH, et cetera. So, the owner is required to do a statistical analysis of the laboratory data to determine if there was an elevated detection. They do the statistical analysis to confirm if it's a detection or an anomaly. And I want to note it here that the Waimanalo Gulch landfill has not, since it's been open, it has not indicated a release of leachate since, and they sample nine wells around the landfill itself. So since 1989, they haven't had any detections in their wells that have indicated a release from the landfill.
Okay, Mike, thank you very much for that presentation. I'm assuming you're done for this part?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, so Mike, if you don't mind, stop sharing. I thought maybe it would be
Yeah.
easier just to have
Let me remind
everybody's
you.
faces out there.
How do I get back to?
Actually, just stop sharing your slide right here, and then that's good. Then we'll get everybody into like a social setting. I'm going to open it up for a discussion at this point. So at this time, anybody from the committee, feel free to ask questions to the Board of Water Supply or to HDR, who, by the way, is ENV's consultant in this process. I think it's even reasonable to have BWS ask questions of ENV and or HDR for any of the presentation materials. I really would like for this part of today's meeting to be an open discussion. These are significant concerning events that need to be discussed, and I'm really grateful that we're doing it so early on in this process. So at this time, I'm opening it up to anybody with a question or comment, whether it be committee members or BWS or city. I'll do my best to facilitate, and I'll try to do it in an orderly manner.
Hey, John, I have a question.
Yes, Jimmy.
Okay, this is for BWS. I mean, they showed the slide on Honolulu, the samples compared to, I guess, was Baratania samples. They showed the two samples of the two wells, and they had some concerns about some certain. I didn't look at the contaminants or whatever was in there, but why is there a difference, and where's the Honolulu wells alphabet soup coming from? Is that,
Thank you, Jimmy. And Erwin, if it helps, we can just say the word and we can make you presenter again, and you can pop that slide
Sure.
back up if it
I
helps.
think it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the analytes that I showed in the Honolulu wells are those that are naturally occurring currently in the water that's pumped from the source. The wells are currently located actually in the Honolulu area, just in that area that's identified as a potential new site for a landfill. And I just put up in there for comparative purposes to show what was in the leachate and actual groundwater testing that was done from the Waimanalo Gulch landfill area already to kind of illustrate potentially what could be available from a landfill. And if the leachate system, for any reason, was not able to hold back these pollutants, what would potentially be available to any of our wells, and how it could potentially have the effect it would have on those wells.
Thank you, Erwin. Jimmy, did you have a follow-up to that, or are you good?
No, I guess that answers my question. I guess that landfills are pretty far away, but so I mean the leachate and everything. I guess we're concerned about that. So I'm just wondering, it's a good comparison, right, on the groundwater.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the existing Waimanalo Gulch landfill is concerned, yes, it is in an area that's not affecting our wells, and for the purposes of consideration of a new site, places at or below the no pass line or that underground injection control line would be really ideal from a protection of an aquifer perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted somebody. I don't know if that was Suzanne or
Yeah.
Cynthia. Suzanne, okay.
I do have a question.
Please.
Probably both for Erwin and HDR. In the event of leakage into the aquifer, landfills over that, and I understand the complexity of the leachate catchment systems and protections, but in the event of leakage down the line, what is our ability to clean and remove the contaminants from the drinking water and then to contain any further leakage?
in terms of contamination and treatment, it's going to depend, or the complexity is going to, or ability to treat is going to depend on two factors. Number one, the pollutant that's present, the complexity of that pollutant to remove, and the amount present. If the amount of pollution or contamination is at a level that exceeds the ability to treat, then treatment is no longer an option. So we already have a number of wells, for example, in central Oahu, that have been affected by legacy agricultural chemicals that have been used in this area for pineapple cultivation through the 40s and the 50s. And those are all being currently treated with activated carbon, granular activated carbon filtration. And it's effective because it is at a level that is that we can treat. However, because of regulatory limits, that is pushing the boundaries in which the current technology is able to get to those regulatory limits and deliver water, our ability to deliver water in compliance with those limits. So landfills can contain a very complex array of different kinds of pollutants. There can be, salts such as chlorides. There also can be other industrial or synthetic chemicals within that particular landfill. And some of these can be very complex and difficult to remove. So really it depends on the type of pollutant and the amount that's present.
So we might render that well dead to us if the landfill and the liners and the leachate protective systems were to fail 50 plus years down the line, 80 years down the line. It would, and am I correct in understanding that Hawaii may be unique in our sole reliance on groundwater for our drinking water sources, as in other areas in the country, of course, go to groundwater, but they have other potential sources?
Well, currently, as far as Oahu is concerned, and many of the other islands, groundwater, we are 100% here on Oahu, we are 100% dependent on groundwater. And as I illustrated, there are parts of the aquifer that can produce a substantial amount of water that allows us to sustain not only into the long term, but the population that we have here. That what makes our island here very unique, the size of our aquifer. And so, yes, there is literature out there that indicates that, leachate systems or protection systems can potentially fail. And when that happens over time, the ability to address that, identify where it is and how it affects existing wells, it could actually, and if it impacts it to very large degrees, could actually minimize the ability to serve water in the future. And that is one of the concerns we're currently facing with the Red Hill situation.
So I know in the past, when we were looking at potential landfill locations, that UIC line, and you showed us a map of how the UIC line ran around the coast of the island, all of the potential landfill locations were located below that UIC line.
That's correct.
Now, this committee is considering locations that are above that line. And so I throw the question over to HDR because I think they were involved in really narrowing down the list of possible sites for the city. Is that correct? So
Suzanne, I think you
Yeah.
also had a question for HDR about in
Yeah.
case there's a failure, right? How do you remedy
In
that?
cases of failure, as we're looking at, evaluating these potential landfill locations, we want to have a very clear understanding of what the risks are down the line if there was some kind of failure in the liner system, and that can be, 50, 80 years down the line, even after that landfill is no longer in use and closed, and what that means to our drinking water and to the life of our island. So I really want to probe into this a bit so that I understand it as best as I can, because I want to know, in the event of a failure, what are our options? And that, may be an engineering question for HDR. And then the other question for HDR is, there were some sites on the leeward side that had been eliminated from our list of possibilities by state legislation that said no more landfills on that side of the island. And I just want to know, were those sites that were eliminated, were they above or below the UIC line?
So
Thank you,
John,
Suzanne.
you want me to answer?
Yes, please, Mike.
Okay. So what Erwin brought up is yes, it is correct in if there was a potential for release. I mean, it can be a little bit hypothetical in understanding, unless you can understand, the levels and types of constituents released. You're going to have to do health-based risk to understand, based on the constituents found in the groundwater, what it could do and can cause to the public drinking water system. You're going to have to do fate transport analyses to understand, fate transport analyses of the constituents to understand how they travel and could self-treat through the geology and hydrogeology. So I think trying to put myself out there and say, what can we do to treat it? Well, there's, as Erwin alluded to, there's different types of treatment systems and that you can install or do, and it's it's going to depend on a lot on the levels and the type of release that you would have if you did have a release. So.
The issue is really hot right now with Red Hill.
It is, yes.
And so 80 years ago, they built the fuel tanks at Red Hill, and steel tanks, concrete protections around them. Nothing should have leaked, and yet here we are. So looking at landfills, I know we would engineer the landfills with all the protections, but then 80 years down the line, what are the risks that we might be facing, and then trying to understand how devastating that might be to the island, and what kind of legacy we're going to be leaving in our decision making here about where to put the next landfill.
Suzanne, this is Ernie from the Board of Water Supply. I think you've kind of hit it on the head here. At the time, maybe the construction of the Red Hill facility was state-of-the-art technology, amazing engineering technology. But these facilities, landfills, are not there for 10 years, 20. Once put in there, they're going to be there forever. And we need to analyze decisions on a basically long term. We will always depend on our groundwater resources for fresh water. So for us at the Board of Water Supply, it isn't about, how we treat it or, what treatment technologies. Our preference is to try to keep the resource protected and as pure as possible. And that is our legacy. That is our gift that we want to pass on to the future generations to come, so they don't have to deal with a Red Hill in their neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ernie. I also want to invite anybody from ENV or Refuse Division specifically, if you folks want to, add to this conversation. I know it's a very important one.
John, I had one more question.
Sure, Suzanne.
But I asked already, but I didn't get an answer. The potential landfill sites that were removed from the list on the leeward side due to the state legislation, were they above or below the UIC line?
There were sites that were below the line, yes, that were removed.
Okay, thank you.
And this is Wes Yokoyama, Director of ENV. Maybe to add on to that, since John invited ENV in, the areas that we are showing, those are not preferred areas or anything like that. Those are areas that are allowable by regulation, by legislation, by law, and by, these are the areas that are left. And so that's kind of what we're left with. And so Suzanne's question is very germane in that sense. It's not where ENV wants to put the landfills. These are the areas that we have to choose from right now. And they conflict maybe with, the BWS mission and protection of the aquifer. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you, Wes.
John, Wes, I just want to add to that. I really appreciate Wes and Mike at ENV. It's a real pleasure working with them. I think right now, if there are some constraints that have been created by legislation, in particular state legislation, this may be an opportunity to revisit those. Because of the discussions and I think the attention that's right now is being focused on our precious drinking water resources and how we can preserve and keep them clean and uncontaminated. It may be an opportunity to actually kind of revisit some of the constraints that were created by legislation that isn't necessary based on other matters, but in terms of trying to prevent contamination of a vital resource, it kind of works against it. Well, we've had some discussions and outreach from the state legislators. They are very attuned and attentive to this Red Hill fuel situation. I don't think it was the intent that Red Hill would bring that focus of the importance of pure drinking water to everybody's minds, but it has. So at least my perspective, I think there's an opportunity for maybe revisiting some of the laws and having a different conversation.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Ernie.
Thank you, Ernie. From ENV side, somebody smarter than me, could somebody just do a real quick summary of this legislation that we're talking about in case some of our viewers are not familiar? I believe we're referring to Act 73. So if somebody from ENV could talk a little bit about that and how we got here.
Yeah, I can talk to that. This is Wes again. And maybe before that, I also want to add that, we have looked at areas below the no pass line. And right now, other than Act 73, restraints, with combination of everything, including Act 73, there are no viable sites. So we did look there. We did look at shipping. We did look at other options. And basically those are not going to work. So, but Act 73, I think was passed in 2020. And basically this law says that you cannot place a landfill within a half mile of any residences, hospitals, schools, habitable areas, habitable structures. And you cannot have a landfill in conservation land, what's zone conservation. So this knocked out a lot, almost all of all the sites that were studied previously I think in 2012 and 2017. And so we started this year, this new administration, looking for other sites. And then through the process of elimination, through the regulations, looking at the regulations and restrictions, that's how we came up with these 4 areas. So that's how we got there.
Yeah, and this is Cynthia. I wanted to try to put another spin on this. I know that it was stated that there were locations previously identified for potential landfill sites on the west side, which were below the UIC line. So the question I have, because in the past, there were 2 lines that we had to be concerned with. One was a pass, no pass line, which was identified by the Board of Water Supply, and the other was a UIC line that was supported by the Department of Health, and the lines did not match up. What I thought I heard earlier today was that they are one and the same. So can somebody educate me on when that became one and the same line? Because I'm curious about that. The other thing I want to put out there as just an aside is, although it was also stated that there was no leachate that escaped from Waimanalo Gulch into the groundwater monitoring wells, I'll remind everybody that when Waimanalo Gulch was fined $2.8 million, when the fine came out, which was negotiated down, one of the items out of the 17 items that they were kicked on was the fact that their leachate was a hell of a lot higher than 12 inches in the bottom of their landfill site. And I think if they did not get into the groundwater, it was only through luck that it did not spill outside of Waimanalo Gulch. So those are a couple of things to think about. That I know that we're talking about doing a double liner for wherever we're going to go, especially if it's above whatever, whether it's called a UIC or the pass no pass line. But Waimanalo Gulch, don't forget, this landfill liner system was set up in 1989 when they were first starting to do liners. And I don't believe that that one is necessarily a double, entirely a double layered landfill liner. So there's there's multiple messages running around in here that I just want to bring to everybody's attention, because we may be talking a little bit Granny Smith apples and Honeycrisp apples.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. If I could, I guess, summarize, you generally had 2 points. One was you wanted clarification from the Board of Water Supply if there is a difference. If so, what is the difference between the UIC versus pass no pass? And then the second thing, and this one might be towards the city and or HDR, to talk about what happened previously at Waimanalo Gulch and their operations then. So Board of Water Supply, if you folks can address the UIC versus pass no pass, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, John. This is Ernie. I'm going to ask Barry Usagawa to explain the difference between the UIC underground injection control line and the no pass. Barry?
Okay, so hello everyone. As I understand it, it is correct that they are not the same line. They are both regulatory tools to protect groundwater, but from two different, pathways, I guess. So UIC stands for underground injection control. It regulates injection wells. An injection well is a hole in the ground that's deeper than it is wide. In general, it is more seaward than the pass no pass line because, of course, they are injecting. So it is more conservative in that way. It is managed by the Department of Health. I believe it is set by the amount of chlorides in the groundwater at, I believe, 10,000 milligrams per liter. So it's actually in the saltwater coastal zone areas. For instance, it is, if you know Campo Industrial Park, Malakole, the line is along Malakole Road and goes around the old Barbers Point Naval Air Station. The pass no pass line is an estimate of areas of thick cap rock. Now, Erin showed you the map of the cap rock around the island, and that's basically corals and sediments that have been deposited around the island when the ocean levels were much higher. The sea levels have risen and fallen, and after it receded, you get corals that are up, further up in the coast. So in the area, that line is approximately Farrington Highway. Between Farrington, it could be in areas, it could be slightly below, I think in the Polo area, but around the city of Kapolei, it's roughly around Farrington Highway. So it's further inland, and it is used to guide decisions around ground disposal, primarily around individual wastewater systems when, like cesspools and untreated type of ground disposal. So below the line, it would flow into the cap rock, and there would be there is no connection between the either you don't have a freshwater lens, and that's true around the coast, but in the upper fringe areas of the pass no pass line, there are freshwater aquifers below it, but because of the impermeable nature of the contact between the basalt and the cap rock, it's pretty much impermeable and does not allow any pollutants to pass through into the basalt. So it, again, to summarize, both are two tools to protect groundwater resources. One is from ejection, the other is from other types of activities that could potentially contaminate the drinking water aquifer. One is geologically based, the other one is water quality based on levels of seawater.
Perfect. Thank you, Barry. Any other comments from Board of Water Supply?
No.
Okay, great. Thank you. Cynthia, so to your second question, I'm going to ask ENV, somebody from ENV to take a shot at that one for past events at Waimanalo Gulch Sanitary Landfill.
So I'll start, and then I'll let Ahmad Sadri, our landfill guy, kind of chime in afterward. But yeah, we have made, I'll be the first to admit, we have made a lot of mistakes in the past, and we're definitely trying to learn from them, but that doesn't mean in the future those mistakes can't happen again, if we forget what we've done. But it's hard to forget, when we've been fined so much and we have consent decrees and all of that. So that's part of it. The other thing I wanted to kind of mention related to what Cynthia said, Waimanalo Gulch was originally designed to be a single liner system, and like she said, we're planning to go with double liner, and Waimanalo Gulch did switch over to double liners in about 2010 in the newer cells. So the construction has improved, and to that point, the technology has improved over the years, and these liner systems are supposed to be rated for hundreds of years. That doesn't mean, of course, that hundreds of years later they're not going to leak. So just wanted to mention that. So Ahmad, I don't know if you had anything to add.
Hi, it's Ahmad. Yeah, regarding the past history of events at Waimanalo Gulch, there's some really good references on our website, honolulu.gov, Opala. And in the Google search, put in landfill status, and it has many years of the past quarterly public meeting notes. That has a lot of information about what occurred at the landfill previously, especially with respect to the 2010-2011 storms that created a flood at the landfill. The documents would have reference to the court cases that arose out of the flooding, along with reference to the consent decree and the case number. So I would point the committee and the attendees to those resources that are available on our website.
Thank you, Ahmad. Cynthia, do you have any other follow-up questions for either Ahmad or Josh?
No, I just thought it was important that we all off of the same basis regarding definitions and what had happened versus what's being proposed.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia.
I have a question for Cynthia, if I may.
Sure.
Cynthia, if I understood your question about the the event at Waimanalo Gulch, where the leachate catchment system almost overflowed, was that associated with that 2010, 2011 heavy rainfall and storm, and having so much excess water coming through the landfill? Because if it was, I think it points out something very important about the landfill design and the catchment systems. So as we're looking as to where we're going to place the next landfill, double liners, leachate catchment systems, if we have heavy rainfall and heavy storms, there's that possibility. Again, I'm looking at what our risks are when we put things potentially over an aquifer, that with heavy rains and heavy storms, is there that risk that that leachate system would be overwhelmed? I was wondering if that's what you were sort of probing into.
Not necessarily, Suzanne. My understanding of the whole flooding issue that occurred in the 2010, 2011, where everything washed out to the ocean, was that partly what was happening is the diversionary ditch that was supposed to be developed on the Waianae side of the landfill was under construction and not completed, and therefore, because of that, there was no guidance or direction for the water, and it just overflowed the detention basin down at the bottom. I don't know whether or not that rainstorm allowed enough water to percolate in to raise the leachate levels as high as they did. I would have to go back and look at the sequence of events, but the large fine that was submitted, as I said, it was, the leachate was not down in the 12 to 18 inch range, it was in feet. So it was significantly out of management control at that time regarding the level of the leachate in there. And there was also, if I'm not mistaken, and again, I'm pulling stuff off the top of my head here, I would have to go back. I believe they also had some problems with some of their pumps at that time also.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a combination of events and issues that occurred. And I haven't done the post-mortem to figure out what came first, the leachate or the height of the leachate. And, that's for somebody who is more of a landfill designer than me. I mean, all I know is I can typically ask the right engineering questions. But in this particular case, like I said, I did not do the actual personal analysis to figure out which came first or what the circumstances were that allowed that to occur.
Thank you, Cynthia. I'm wondering if anybody from the city would have any more insight into this situation.
I think short of any new information, John, I think, because these events happen and because we're aware of them and we're designing the landfill moving forward, we would take all of these things into consideration. And like Cynthia mentioned, the stormwater system, the new stormwater system at Waimanalo Gulch wasn't complete, and that new stormwater system is something that we'd probably model into our new design. So all of these things, it's of course bad that they occurred, but what we can learn from them and make our future landfill better.
John, I don't know if you saw, but Barry had put a question in the chat to explain how stormwater is managed at the existing and proposed landfills? And are there contaminants of note that could run off the site and or infiltrate the groundwater? And then he asks, is detained runoff going to be allowed to infiltrate into the ground, or would it be trucked to a wastewater treatment plant like the leachate? So again, I think what's being asked there is, you know, for runoff from whatever current and or future landfill, how is that handled? Is it just allowed to percolate into the ground, or is it sampled and taken out and treated rather than just allowed to run into a detention basin?
Cynthia, thank you so much for pointing that out. Barry, so to answer your questions, I'm going to turn it over to either the city or HDR to respond to those questions.
I can
And while you
respond to that
guys,
question.
okay, perfect, Mike.
So any runoff from the landfill itself has to be managed through the NPDES program, where you sample and monitor the runoff itself. But the design of the system would be runoff going into detention or retention ponds and released to wherever that release point is. If during the operation of the landfill, if stormwater runoff gets in contact with waste, it has to be treated as leachate. So you would have to contain that water and treat it. Otherwise, that's the purpose for the daily cover and the intermediate cover soils, is to protect to cover the refuse after the end of the day and help protect it from runoff and runoff.
I have a follow-up question to that, if I may.
Sure.
So in the 2010-2011 storm that we had in that flood, that was called by many as a 100-year storm. And then there was a lot of discussion about how you build the detention pond capacity to handle a 100-year storm. And if I recall, it was not feasible to create a detention pond large enough to handle these unusual events. However, we're looking as the Landfill Advisory Committee about the risks associated with placing a landfill over groundwater, drinking water. And then we're looking at the event of 100-year storms, even 50-year storms that may overwhelm our systems. What then is that potential for contamination from runoff from these storms, or from it overwhelming the leachate protection systems?
And if I could add one more thing to that, 6 inches worth of cover is easily washed off. And I can tell you that the storm system that we had this past weekend actually put ruts in a trail that one of the nonprofits that I volunteer for manages, and we had anywhere from a foot to 2 feet of soil and rocks washed away based on that storm in Makaha Valley. So I think Suzanne's point is valid.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Cynthia. If the city wants to provide a response now, that's fine. Or if we have further discussions about these types of issues. I know it's a lot more complicated, and I'm not poo-pooing the environmental side at all, but the selection criteria, which we are yet to discuss, it's multifaceted, and there's just a ton of other factors to consider. I will acknowledge, though, that we have a question from the public, from Claire Caulfield. Claire, sorry, but we're not allowed to really take public comments, but what I can promise you is that we can note your questions and then we can respond back. We have your email address, so we can respond back offline. I didn't want you to feel ignored at this time. Any other committee members with comments or thoughts, or even Board of Water Supply, ENV people? Anything to further the discussion on this?
Yeah, John, I have one last question, kind of
Yes.
following up from Susanna and Cynthia, yeah. And then
Yes, Jimmy.
we always talk about risk and everything else like that. And so question is, what's the percentage of, what could go wrong? I guess the question for a landfill. And has there been nationwide, I mean, what would be the biggest fear for failure for a landfill, being just so sensitive, And so, I mean, nationwide, we should have some ideas. You brought up a slide where you're not supposed to locate it on the roof line or whatever like that, or some places that are not stable. But I think that being that groundwater is so important, or the landfill is an important subject matter. Is there examples of landfills not operating with double liners and everything, the newest technology, not performing as they're supposed to be? I mean, it's just maybe a loaded question for HDR, but would be good starting point to know if something could go wrong. What would that be? Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Mike, if you don't mind taking a shot at it, and Ahmad, I know you're well versed in this subject as well, so just be on call to jump in.
So I think on the mainland, you could find landfills that are lined to Subtitle D standards that probably are impacting groundwater or do have a release. I'm almost certain you can, and you can find plenty that haven't either. What you don't know is the ones that have had a release. What were the underlying conditions in the design, construction quality assurance, and the level of design that went into that landfill. So you would have to go out and find examples of that and go back and try to look at the history of why that happened. So we researched a little bit, and we didn't find any EPA reports that have gathered all the landfills together that have releases or don't have releases, because some of the landfills are pre-Subtitle D. They're not lined, and they're right next to a landfill that is lined, and they do have releases. So they don't know where the releases are coming from, but they speculate it's from the unlined part of the landfill because they piggyback on each other. So there's so many variables that trying to understand of why certain landfills have releases and don't have releases. But I think when a landfill doesn't have a release, the underlying design, the stuff I showed you today, the design and the installation of the liner system, the construction quality assurance, and the operations themselves all factor in on whether that landfill is going to be is not going to leak.
Ahmad, I wanted to give you an opportunity to jump in if you have any comments.
Yeah, we also reached out to one of our professional organizations called SWANA, Solid Waste Association of North America. We found a couple of publications they did with their applied research group. They're kind of old reports, though. There's one from 2004 and one in 2011 dealing with the performance of liner systems at landfills, and then another one dealing with the environmental performance of landfills. So we're still digesting those reports and seeing whether it can be apples to apples and if it's relevant to the work we're doing here. But those are a couple of references that we came across recently.
Ahmad, will we be getting more information about that down the line?
We can provide links or copies to those reports.
Thank you.
I also want to point out that Steve Chang provided a comment in the chat area, so I'll just read it out loud. His comment is, the stormwater overflow was due to the 2010 rainfall event. The exceedance of leachate levels were due to a previous DOH enforcement action. Hopefully that helps. Anybody else for topics of discussion, questions, anything like that?
Can you hear me now? I'm on off mute.
Yes, yes, we can hear you, Steve.
Yeah. So the main issue is that the concern about leachate levels. Normally, it's supposed to be regulatory, no more than 6 inches of leachate on the liner. And the concern there, from my experience, has been the concern that with moisture at the bottom of landfill, you could create a condition where you have heat being generated, and it can initiate smoldering of existing solid waste. And the concern there is that it could potentially damage the liner. And so that's a concern because it is basically a plastic membrane as opposed to the previous designs where we use 10 to the -6 clay, which would not catch on fire. So I think that's why we're always monitoring the leachate levels to make sure that we don't create an environment where we could actually cause another source of energy to destroy the liner.
Thank you, Steve. And in
Okay.
case anybody's just, picking this up for the first time, Steve, can you just quickly explain your background, why you know so much about this?
Unfortunately, I spent about the last 22 years of my state government role as the program manager for the solid and hazardous waste. So I was involved in many of the solid waste recycling activities at the state level.
Thank you, Steve. Any other discussions?
John, I just wanted to mention one thing. This discussion has made me think that, we have to get a little bit more in depth with the design of the landfill, but particularly right now, it's the stormwater, what we're designing for the 100-year storm, 50-year storm, et cetera.
Mhm.
So we can come up with that after we discuss. And if there's any other parameters that, the LAC members need to make their evaluation weighing criteria, et cetera, just send an email directly to me and you can let me know and we can look into it if you think of something later.
Mhm. But you bring up a great point, Josh. This is these are very important discussions. And we don't want to put the cart before the horse because right now this task is to cite the landfill location. And then once a preferred site is identified or sites are identified, the next step is to do an EIS. And then the step after that, or even concurrent to the EIS, is to begin design. So some of these discussion points that we're hitting right now are really steps that are going to happen in the future. And I know that's not a great answer because you folks as committee members, have a very important decision to make here and you want as much information now. It's just going to be impossible to get everything right now because there's a process to this project, unfortunately. So just ask for everybody's cooperation with that. But keep asking those questions because they're great questions and great discussions. Anything else before we move on?
I have one more. Sorry.
Please, Suzanne, go ahead.
So just to clarify, we have 4 potential sites that we're looking at, the landfill committee.
Clarification, Suzanne, there's 4 areas. We're
Areas.
designating them as areas. Within each area, there's potentially sites that can be selected within each area.
So in each of those areas, all 4 of those areas are located above the UIC line, and they're all located over groundwater and aquifers. Is that correct as well?
I'm nodding, but I'm going to let Josh answer that.
That is correct, yes.
That's correct. So if this committee were to look at this issue as being enormously important, we wouldn't have any potential areas to look at? Again, that's just for clarification. That was a question.
I think the committee can decide, that distance to the aquifer and the risk is the number one factor, overriding factor, you know, and say, you know, all other factors are, you know, might just be like a zero weighting. This is the ultimate factor. So you do have that power. That's the power that we gave you to advise the city, right?
And then where would that put us, Wes? Would it put us in a position of what Ernie was talking about, revisiting the legislation that was restricting other areas?
It would put us in a situation where I guess as director, I'd have to go to the LUC and ask for an extension for next year because we will not make December 2022 naming of a site. We'd have to look at alternatives, which probably the strongest alternative would be either an exemption or changing the Act 73 law. And that's not something that we really want to do. There's a lot of people that you know, back this law for a reason. So there will be, you know, a lot of discussion on that, and we still need to talk to our administration about whether they want to support that too. So that's kind of where we would be at. But the LAC would be doing its duty. It would be advising the city that, hey, this is the ultimate criteria. The others are zero. So we do not recommend any of these areas to be considered. And then we'd move forward from there.
Thank you for clarifying, Wes. I think it's good for us to know that we have those options as we continue discussion.
Thank you, Wes. And just to reiterate, I think for this LAC, you know, the milestone really is to select site by 2022. And if there are any hurdles that prohibit that timeline, you know, then that's what needs to be considered. There might be other sites that are feasible, but would not meet the 2022 deadline. Okay. Any other discussions? If not, we're gonna move on to the agenda. So Mike, I'm gonna hand it back to you. We're gonna do and I know it's 11:53 already, but we're gonna go over, it looks like, a little bit. So please bear with us. Mike is gonna go over the introduction to the site evaluation criteria. Mike, I believe you're still presenter, so you can go ahead and share your screen. And I guess while you do that, BWS folks, you know, you're more than welcome to stick around to the conclusion of this. But if I know you folks have lots of other very important things, so if you need to drop off, I just wanted to say thank you very much for your participation and cooperation. It's very much appreciated.
Well, thank you, John, and thanks, Wes and Mike and the committee. I'm sorry, during this meeting, I was actually dealing with some Red Hill issues, so I had to drop in and out, but mahalo for the opportunity.
Understandably.
If you want to stay, Board of Water Supply folks, you can stay, but aloha, everybody, be safe.
Thank you for all that
Thank you,
you do. Thank you.
Mahalo.
Okay, Mike, back to you.
So can you hear me then again?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So moving on the agenda, we're going to walk through probably fairly quickly the site evaluation criteria. So before we get into the list of them, we wanted to show the LAC members is sort of our approach in the schedule, in developing and approving the final criteria list. You're going to have some homework coming up in meeting 5 and meeting 6, and we're going to do some scoring hopefully in meeting 7 or 6, and then some final scoring or reviewing the scoring in meeting 7. So the definitions for objective criteria and subjective criteria, we put them down here. The objective criteria is based strictly on unbiased, quantifiable facts and observations. It's not influenced by personal feelings, prejudices, perceptions, or desires. Unlike subjective, it's based on personal opinions, experiences, knowledge, interpretations, assumptions, points of view, emotions, and judgments. So we came up with a list of objective criteria and subjective criteria that we believe applies to selection of the landfill location. We also put a definition, or excuse me, an example of objective and subjective. So if we're looking at the location relative to parks and recreational facilities, the objective criteria would be just strictly the distance to the nearest park is greater than 1/2 mile. We would give that information to you. In the subjective criteria scoring, it would be the interpretation of the LAC committee's members themselves who would decide if the distance to that park is important or less important to the scoring. So they would score that appropriately, or how they felt about it, I guess. So the objective scoring criteria, we've got a list here. I'm not going to walk through the list because we posted this and given it to the members. But I think overall there's 18 objective and subjective scoring criteria. Some of them a few of them like landfill capacity. The city needs a certain capacity for the landfill in order for it to last a certain period of time. And right now they want a landfill that will last 20 years based on the tonnages they have. So we'll give you the tonnage that they want, and if the landfill proposed location meets or exceeds that, it may get a better scoring. If it doesn't meet that, it would get a lesser scoring. So that's how the objective scoring criteria in the list. Moving on to subjective, again, the list is here. It's all of it's based on, there's water quality subjective scoring, there's archaeological, surface water, ecological. These are significant of importance. And so we're gonna, in the next meeting, start to come up with the scoring, the levels of scoring, and further discussion with the LAC members on these. That's really it on that.
Sorry, just to clarify a little bit. So the list that Mike presented, we did provide to the LAC and post on the websites, and that's meant to be kind of an introductory list, just as a starter point. And you may have noticed that one of the criteria was dependent on the BWS presentation today, and that's likely going to be the no pass line, which we had previously thought was going to be it, but getting BWS involved, we got the final kind of say on that.
So Josh, before you go any further, if we're going to talk about that, are we talking about the pass, no pass line, or are we going to talk the UIC line, which Mike talked about?
It will be the no pass line per Board of Water Supply, which I believe is more conservative than the UIC line.
Yes, it is. Okay. Just want to clarify.
And then also to clarify, so in the schedule of events, the next meeting will finalize this list. So anything, any suggestions to be added to the list can be sent directly to me by email. And then we'll present the final list next time. And then as homework for the next meeting, the criteria will be weighed by the LAC.
Well, I have one question right off the bat. Mike had presented significance of nearby parks and recreation facilities. He said it was objective significance within a half-mile radius. On the sheet that you sent to us, that's a subjective criteria. Yeah,
so to explain that, if you want to go to that slide, Mike. So we had some changes in the last day or so that changed. We had an objective and subjective component, but because we've made it within a half mile, that took care of the objective portion. So the subjective portion is more what the significance of the park is. So as has been provided to the LAC and the public, we did get some comments from the Honolulu historic site, and that's what's being referenced in this subjective definition or example, sorry. And so if you believe that that is an important site and should, receive a rating that is high to avoid, then that's the subjective portion of it. Sorry. And thereby the criteria you're really ranking now, rating.
Hey, Josh, just to circle back on something you said earlier, for clarification purposes, the work that's going to be done between now and the next LAC meeting, if there are comments, questions about criteria, will the next meeting number 5, be used to share what the final criteria is, or is meeting number 5 going to be used to discuss and then finalize the criteria?
It will be the final list, and so we'll go over the final list and definitions at that point.
Okay, so there will be a decision made between now and meeting number 5 to create a final list, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Correct. And to kind of go a little bit further into that, so the authority under which the LAC was formed specifies that the list will be provided by the department, but that the LAC is the one that does the evaluation. So we're open to any suggestions, and we've discussed that, most of the suggestions, if they're reasonable, we can put on the list, and it'll be up to fellow LAC members to then weigh them appropriately as they think. So, like I said, you can send those suggestions to me. I would like to receive them by end of December so we can consider them, before the next LAC meeting. But the next LAC meeting is in February, so if possible, send them as soon as possible.
Josh, I have a question.
Sure.
As LAC, do we have any input if there's on the would it be the ranking or the rating? I'm not sure if I'm using the right words. Would we be able to provide input if there's particular criteria that is overwhelmingly important that we feel disqualifies certain sites? If we, in other words, you're going to give us these criteria and we're ranking them. I don't know if we're giving them 5s or 1s or whatever our number system is going to be. 5, let's say, being most important, and we give it a 5. But in our mind, that 5 means we shouldn't even be going there because of that one criteria. Do we have any input into that, or is it all going to be just, a combination of our rating and weighting the criteria, and then it'll.
So as it's structured right now,
I don't know that I'm making myself clear yet, but are you getting it? What I'm
give it a shot, Josh. Give it a shot, and let's see if it addresses Suzanne's comments or concerns.
So as the LAC is structured right now, we're combining the scores.
Right.
But we recognize that there are critical or fatal flaws or criteria that might influence whether or not we can be at a site. And that's something that we're hopefully gonna find. Once we narrow down the sites, we're gonna hopefully try to find and eliminate right away. And if not, then those will come up during the EIS process. But currently, the way the LAC structure is structured, we're just asking you to score and then have the ranking. But any discussion, of course, that comes up in these public meetings will be considered. So if there's something critical that you believe will eliminate a site, by all means, bring it up during the meetings, and that will, of course.
Do we have any input in establishing some kind of threshold? In other words, a any of the 4 sites would need to reach some threshold of ranking in order to be considered. In other words, if you're considering all 4 sites and you're just looking at the best of the worst, you know,
So,
but so is there a threshold that they have to meet in order to be acceptable?
so in the last meeting or the second to last meeting, I'm not exactly sure at this point, but there will be a discussion about the report. So if there's a conclusion like that the LAC wants to draw, that would be a good place to put it.
All right.
So say all the scores come out, 30 out of 100 on average, and the LAC says we wanted to have a score of 50 for each site in order for it to be acceptable.
That's
That can be put
ongoing. Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Josh, did you also say that the LAC has input on the weighting as well?
Yeah, so the weighting is actually part of the scoring process. So as I had mentioned in previous meetings, so there's going to be 2 components to the score for a site and for a criteria. So the first part is going to be the weight. So how important one criteria is to another. And the second part is going to be the actual rating. So that's going to be really where the subjective part of it comes in. And that's going to be determined by each individual member.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Any
And
other
those will be
questions?
combined, into the final score.
Thank you, Josh. Any other questions or discussions on the criteria? Okay, so if I got it correct, Josh, what we're hoping to do is to have the LAC provide any comments regarding the criteria. Any comments will be due by December 31st, 2021. And you're going to take those comments and the city is going to develop a final criteria list, and that's going to be presented at our next LAC meeting, which is meeting number 5. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, and we hope to get that final list out sooner so that the public will have time to also comment on it during the next meeting.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Okay, so any other discussions on this thing? Mike, if you don't mind making me presenter again so I can take us home.
John, I have one last question looking at
Jimmy,
the
go ahead, please.
So, on number 10, it says 1,000 feet from a municipal water system or well. How did you come up with just 1,000 feet? I mean, I would really think that's a comment, but if you're following, is that part of the law or Act 73 or what is it? It's like, 1,000 feet is not that far. So I just wonder how you came up with 1,000.
Okay, thank you, Jimmy. Josh, go ahead.
Sure. So generally, when DOH is analyzing a site for contamination, in response to a release, they'll look at any wells within 1,000 feet of the site. So that doesn't necessarily only include board of water supply wells, but also community drinking water wells for just a small community, or ag wells, anything of that nature. So that's where the 1,000 feet came from.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Josh. Okay, so we are now with the presentation and discussions section. That was really good, by the way. I appreciate everybody's input and contribution. Okay, so now to the final section, which is announcements and adjournment. Thankfully, this is going to be quick. So we've already kind of referred to LAC meeting number 5. That's going to be our next meeting, and it's tentatively scheduled for February 7th, 2022. Can you believe 2022? And the time is tentatively scheduled again for 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. I think if there's going to be any adjustments made, our team will let you folks know. But if not, it should already be on your calendars just to reserve that spot. Okay, and the final step is adjournment. So consistent with meeting number 3, I'm going to ask our committee members if there are any other business items to discuss at this time. If not, is there a motion to adjourn LAC meeting number 4?
John, this is Ken. I move to adjourn this meeting.
Thank you, Ken. Do I have a second?
I second it.
Thank you, Suzanne. Are there any objections? If not, LAC meeting number 4 is adjourned at 12:10. Well, not too bad. It's only 10 minutes past. I thought we were going to go a lot longer today. But on behalf of our project team, City, really, I wanted to thank all of you for your time and your commitment to this process. We know it's a difficult decision, and today's discussion doesn't make it any easier, but it just kind of highlights how important this decision is and how much impact it has. So thank you very much, LAC members and the community as well for following. We really do appreciate your participation in the process. And on behalf of the project team, wishing you folks a very, very happy holiday season. Be safe out there. Thank you and take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Happy holidays.
Luciana, if you're still there, we can